What's up guys, Jakob Owens here for the Buff Nerds, and today I thought I would do something a little differently than I've normally done. I've never really done a gear review, but I've had lots of people ask me questions about the Sony A7S II, so I thought I would go ahead and make a gear review video. So first I want to talk about quickly why I got the camera. Originally I had a GH4 that I would shoot a lot of the music videos that are on this channel. And I use the GH4 as a camera, a smaller camera, to do very kind of independent, smaller shoots. When I do my bigger shoots, I use the Red Epic camera. But for my smaller independent shoots, I use the GH4 because it was a great small camera for a great affordable price. I've heard a lot of good things about the Sony A7S, and then the A7S II came along, and I kind of just looked into it a little bit, and I really wanted a better camera in low light situations. The GH4 is kind of notorious for not being great in low light and not being able to push the ISO very high. So I got the A7S Mark II with the intention of just using it in low light situations. Once I got the Sony A7S II and I began kind of just playing with it on some shoots and doing some test stuff, one, I found out the low light, yes, is incredibly just, good. There's so many good positive things about this camera, and I really sat there and was like, when would I use my GH4 over this? Low light situations, Sony. Color profile, Sony. Dynamic range, Sony. Autofocusing, Sony. Full frame sensor, Sony. Frame rate, Sony. So with that being said, I'm gonna go in and talk about the pros and cons of the Sony A7S II. Pro number one, the build. It's a great build. For me at least, it fits great in my hand. It's lightweight, it's not heavy, and it's just a great size compared to, I held a 5D Mark III in my hand the other day, and I hadn't held one in so long, and I just felt like I was holding a brick. And this just feels, it's so much more compact, easier to transport, it's smaller, it's just, overall the build quality and size is just really good. I love having the full frame sensor. The full frame sensor for me is great because now the lenses that I use are native to their size. With the GH4 and other, mirrorless cameras that have the APS-C sensor and that have that crop factor, it's such an annoyance because your lens, if you want your, you want to use your wide angle lens and it's a 16, it's not true to that 16. With the Sony, it's true. So this is a 16 to 35 Sony E-mount lens. And when I use it with the camera, it's true to its size. It's a 16 to 35. So I love that, that it has a full frame sensor in it. With this, I use right now the photo diox adapter, so I can use some of the Canon lenses I have. If you're gonna get an adapter, I recommend getting the Metabones adapter. I have noticed that the photo diox adapter with this is just a little slower and clunkier, especially when it comes to autofocus in pictures and in video. It's not as quick and smooth as the Metabones adapter would be. That being said, the native E-mount lenses that work on the camera, when they're native straight to the camera, the autofocusing is lightning fast. I've never been one to do a lot of photography, but I'm gonna get more into it now that I'm kind of moving over to the Sony mirrorless system. But the autofocusing for the photography is so quick, as well as the video is impressive too. The video autofocusing is gonna work quicker with the native lenses, but if you have the Metabones adapter with, your Canon lenses or whatever other lenses you're using with the adapter, the autofocus works even quick for video too, which can be really helpful. There's a lot of times where you're having a hard time searching for that focus manually, and to be able to just kind of quickly hit autofocus and have autofocus for you, and then you can double check that to make sure it's a nice little tool that I've never been able to use before on other cameras. So the autofocusing for video to set up your shot is a really cool tool. So another really cool thing about this is the 5-axis image stabilization inside. This is awesome for like if you're just on the go handheld and you don't have any gear like a shoulder rig or steady cam. It's not going to give you that steady cam look, but it just helps from a lot of times when you have smaller cameras, it's really easy to kind of get the jitters and get shakes in your images. And this camera really smooth that out. I can be on a 50 millimeter and kind of circling a subject, and I mean, there's a little bounce to it, but it's definitely pretty smoothed out. And if I were to be doing that on, you know, a GH4 or any other camera that doesn't have that built-in 5-axis stabilization, it would not be possible to be walking around a subject and keeping a smooth image as I'm trying to move with a 50 millimeter lens. So the 5-axis stabilization is great for if you're on the go, handheld, doing any sort of handheld shoot, traveling, music video, whatever it is. People have complained about the Sony. I don't know if it was the older generation Sonys or the newer ones, but overheating is not an issue with this at all. I've never had it once even come close to overheating or show any signs of overheating, so no overheating. And of course, one of the biggest things is 4K internal recording. That was a huge importance for me, because when I'm editing, I like to really punch in and punch out, or change my frame, or just for a stylistic effect I like to use when I edit, which I'll demonstrate, like I'll show a clip here. I really like to punch in and punch out quick to the beat of the music. So 4K internal allows you to have all those pixels to really pull in and pull out. With the sensor and the 4K internal, you can shoot up to 24 frames at 100 megabits, as well as 30 frames at 100 megabits. Then you can also jump it down to 60 frames at 50 megabits, and then you can jump it to 120 frames a second. But once you jump into the 120 frames a second, it no longer uses the full frame of the camera. It crops it in, and so that's unfortunate, but it's still 120 frames a second, which is a huge tool to have within a camera this size. So that's really cool that it shoots 120 frames. Sucks it's not at the full frame sensor, but still really cool. And of course, the biggest thing with this camera, its low light capabilities. I've heard a lot about it going into getting the camera, how great it was at low light. And I went down the street the other night and just quickly was just kind of messing with the ISO and seeing how high I could push it while still getting a usable image. And again, this thing is the king of low light. So if you're looking for a low light camera, if you do a lot of stuff in low light, whether you're filming, you know, documentary stuff or tour stuff like for artists, or you're just in a lot of low light scenarios, or you just want a camera that's great in low light situations for music videos, whatever it is, this camera is incredible for that. Here's a clip from a music video where we just went out at night in the streets of LA. No lighting was used, no external lighting whatsoever. This is just straight from the camera and the surrounding lighting under this bridge, and this is what it looks like. The colors just pop, there's no noise. I don't even remember what ISO I was at here, but it's just a super clean image from no external lighting being used whatsoever. All I was doing is pushing the ISO a little bit, and to maintain such a clear crystal image along with bringing out the colors, just again, the Sony is a beast at that. So one of the pros that kind of leads me into the cons is the S-Log profiles. The S-Log profiles are great for getting that high dynamic range. I mean, it's really quite a difference from just using one of the standard picture profiles and jumping over into S-Log. The difference between the highlights and the shadows is immense. So S-Log 2 and 3 are great for getting that flat image and that high dynamic range. But that being said, that leads me into the con. With those profiles, I've had sometimes a little trouble with some noise issues and the image getting a little muddied, because you're supposed to technically overexpose it a little bit, which kind of sucks because I like to properly expose my images, because it's the right thing to do to maintain kind of all levels of information. So when using the S-Log or 2.3 profile, sometimes I catch myself properly exposing it and forgetting to overexpose it a little bit, and then when I get my footage back in post, I notice a little muddiness to the image, a possible little bit of just muddiness in the shadows and stuff, just because you're supposed to overexpose it slightly. And if you underexpose the image in those S-Log profiles, it can muddy the image a little bit, which is unfortunate. But once again, just properly exposing the image just a little bit over, using your high ISOs, it's still a great profile for color correction. So One of the bigger cons with this is the battery life. The battery life is a little, you know, it's not the best. I have like 5 or 6 batteries that I keep charged, and you can run upwards of through like 3 a day on a shoot, I think. So not the end of the world. You can just change a battery, but a lot of people get annoyed with having to change a battery a lot. It doesn't really bother me that much. So another con is the eyepiece. At least for me, it's hard. It doesn't necessarily sit flush up along the eye socket, so light can kind of seep in a little bit, which makes it really hard to see internally. And the LCD screen as well, it's very reflective, and outside during the day when there's a lot of sun, it can be really hard to see the screen. So you're kind of like battling with using it as the screen, or you know, trying to use it in here, but you have a little light seeping in. Not the end of the world. So another con, only 12 megapixels in picture mode. That's not the end of the world. Again, if you know how to use a camera and you know how to frame images correctly, you can still take great pictures with this camera. I've taken already a lot of great pictures with it, but it is only 12 megapixels, so there's not a lot of pixels and information there as far as the photo goes, but this is built for video. So if you're worried about photography, you probably wouldn't be buying this camera anyways. You'd be buying it for video and videography, not for photography. So again, not a huge con, because that is just an added bonus that you're able to take pictures with this guy. So, and lastly, one of the other cons is the menu system. It's a little hard to navigate. Again, not the end of the world. The more you use the camera, the more you'll grow and become accustomed to it. I think at first it's just a little hard to navigate, because it's just a little different than your traditional menu systems for cameras. But again, if these are all the major cons to this camera, such as battery life, the viewfinder, cup, the menu system, I will take those cons any day over the cons of the image quality or factors around the image itself and the image it produces. So again, the pros heavily outweigh the cons for this, and a lot of the cons are just little nitpicky stuff like battery life and, you know, viewfinder and little things like that. So really quickly, I took to Twitter and asked you guys what you guys wanted to know specifically about this camera, and you guys asked me some questions, so I'm gonna answer those questions. Damon Lockett asked, how many frames does it go up to? I touched on that earlier. It goes up to 120 frames. The Codfather asked, which aspects made you want to switch from the GH4 to the Sony? Again, touched on that a little earlier. Mainly got it for the low light capabilities of the camera, but then found it to be so much more than just low light, and that's why I'm sticking with it. JSH Films asked, battery life of the Sony A7S II. Again, touched on that. Not the greatest, but I would also recommend getting the battery grip. You can throw in 2 batteries into the battery grip, so once one battery dies, it automatically jumps to the next battery, and then you're saving yourself from having to switch out the battery. So again, to that con of low battery life, there is a solution, not the end of the world. Dutch Ballers asked the price of the Sony A7S II compared to the GH4. It's a little over double the price, but again, has some big features that the GH4 doesn't have. You know, it has the full frame sensor compared to the GH4's crop sensor. It has the 4K internal and 1080 up to 120 frames. GH4 also does 4K internal, but the S-Log picture profiles and the color science in this for skin tones, as well as just the color science overall, is a lot better. The flatter picture profile S-Log 2 and 3 is much better. The autofocusing on this, much better. Just this is a better camera for video overall in every sense. So I think the price is justified. It just depends on your level of filmmaking and the money you're looking to spend on a camera. Jan asked, do I prefer the Sony over the GH4, and in what particular areas? I think you can gather throughout the video kind of those, things I touched on. Again, just kind of overall better in every aspect compared to the GH4. Ryan Milkshakes asked, do I prefer S-Log 2 or 3? I haven't messed with 3 that much. I've been shooting more in 2. I find that S-Log 3 is so flat that sometimes it's really hard to garner the right exposure. If you have a monitor that you can pre-look at your LUTs on S-Log3, I think I would use S-Log3 more, but again, for like kind of run and gun outside, it's very hard to judge the S-Log3 profile because it's so flat. So right now I've just been using S-Log2. I'll probably mess with 3 a little bit later. All right, guys, so that's all for your Twitter questions. Appreciate all the questions, and I hope I didn't really leave anything out about the camera. If you guys have any more questions or stuff I forgot to touch on or didn't think I touched on quite enough, let me know in the comments below. I'll respond to the comments and let you guys know more about the camera and what I like and don't like just by answering your questions. Here to help. Hope this helped. I think that's all I gotta say. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more reviews on different gear I use, such as lenses and different equipment, let me know. I will be happy to make more review videos. And I hope it's something you guys can enjoy enough that I can make more down the road. All right, guys, thanks.